Okay, let's call this morning's meeting to order. Sue, would you take roll, please?
Senator Boner? Senator Hicks?
Excused?
Senator Jones?
Here.
Senator Schuler?
Here.
Chairman Landon?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to Senate Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources. We have 3 bills to consider this morning. I want to get started right away. The good senator's here, and we're gonna change the order just a little bit and go with Senate File 164, pari-mutuel rodeo definitions. Senator, take it away and tell us about this little
Thank
bill.
you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, you actually have 2 1/4 bills because this is a quarter of a bill. So I bring you Senate File 164, pari-mutuel rodeo definitions. Folks, this is old hat for all of you folks. This is the FBI required reporting for pari-mutuel events, and we've now added rodeo into it. We did not put rodeo into the fingerprinting. So when you go to page 3 on this, what it does is we define what a pari-mutuel rodeo event animal is, and define what a rodeo contestant is, and a rodeo stock contractor. And that's really what it is. It defines it for as we go down the road for the FBI fingerprinting and that end of it. It just makes it where we're in compliance again. We've been out of compliance through the years, and this realigns it and creates the definitions for it. So with that, I'd stand for questions.
Well, thank you, Senator. Any questions, committee? I've kind of got one. How did we not have this in place before, Senator? Because you've done quite a bit of work in this area when you were on TRW, all of that. I'm just wondering out loud.
Mr. Chairman, committee, we kind of tried to leave rodeo out of it because of the drug testing and some of the stuff you hit with cowboys. Rodeo is so much different than race events. You know, racing's forever. They've, done blood tests on the horses, all kinds of stuff on the jockeys, and, rodeo, PRCA in particular, but pro events all have their own standards and their own deals, and they indicated that they weren't interested particularly in following the other end if we wanted to do it. So we tried to kind of work our way around what we could on it. FBI made it really clear that they needed to be included in this. The definitions need to be there for pari-mutuel, and we're trying to figure out. We got several outfits that would like to try to do pari-mutuel on rodeo. We've actually done it for years. The steer tripping has happened for. It was it and chariot racing, I think, were the first pari-mutuel events almost before horse racing. And so we're trying to figure out how to get where we can have some rodeos in Wyoming to have pari-mutuel.
Yeah, we, growing up over in Sublette County, Senator, we pretty much had a pari-mutuel if we had a balloon blowing contest. I mean, so. Thank you for that, Senator. Any other questions on this bill of the sponsor? Thank you, Senator. Let's see if we've got anybody who wants to provide any public testimony this morning on Senate File 164, pari-mutuel rodeo definitions. Good morning. Good of you to be here, by golly. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Nick Laramendi. I'm the Executive Director of the Gaming Commission. The one thing that I'd just like to make sure that you're aware of, I noted in this bill under the fiscal note, this says that there's no fiscal impact or personnel impact. This would have a fiscal impact, not only for our agency, but also for the Department of Criminal Investigation to conduct these background checks. It's kind of hard to know how many or what that impact would be, depending on how many contestants would require licensure. For our office, we pay $40 per applicant to conduct the background check. So that is something that I just wanted to draw your attention to.
So, Director, do you have a ballpark figure? Do you have any wag on what that total impact would be?
So I know that for the Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo, there's anywhere between 1,300 and 1,500 contestants. So, I mean, you talk statewide rodeo events, you could look at 3,000 to 5,000 contestants that would have to go get fingerprinted and processed through at $40 a piece. Yeah, it could be substantial.
Okay. Senator Schuler.
Oops, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just thinking about that, this would only impact those folks, Mr. Laramendi, that would offer events where there would be betting, correct?
Chairman Landon, Senator Schuler, that is correct. This would strictly be for a pari-mutuel rodeo event. So if it's a fair rodeo that they're not going to do any wagering on, they wouldn't have to be licensed or anything like that.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Laramendi, excuse me. So the $40 that each contestant pays, I mean, would that help to offset it? Or is that, just a tiny amount?
Mr. Laramendi, go ahead.
Chairman Landon, Senator Jones, we actually currently charge $15 per license. So it's $15 per license and we pay $40 to do the background.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just help me understand what qualifies or would qualify as a pari-mutuel rodeo event. Can you give specific examples? I just remember the blowback and when, back when I was younger and stupider and the government was paying for my health insurance, when I was rodeoing. And I remember the blowback when they started issuing, documents that got sent to the IRS whenever you want a little bit of money. That was quite the change. And so it seems like this might have a pretty big impact, actually. And so I'm just wondering what are the events that this would apply to? Just give me some examples.
Any thoughts on that, Director? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Landon, Senator Boner. So the commission has started drafting rules for this, and this would entail barrel racing, breakaway roping, team roping, rough stock events, essentially an entire rodeo, really.
Go ahead, Senator
Okay,
Boner.
once again, so you said like your county fair doesn't count, but what everything else would? So Cheyenne Frontier Days, the Central Wyoming Rodeo, anything with the PRCA rodeo, would that fall under this requirement?
Senator Driscoll, do you want to handle that one? Jump in there a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, committee, I'm just going to do a little bit of commentary on it and maybe a little ask on history of Nick. So they found a way around this early with the steer tripping in some of those events, and I think that's going to be the only route that's ever going to happen with rodeo. The flat fact of the matter is, and I hate to speak for cowboys, but I am one, and I don't think any of them are going to submit to fingerprinting and drug testing out of the ones I know. It's just, that's not what that sport does. And they're very professional. When you go to the Women's Barrel Racing Association, is different from the PRCA, and the PRCA is different. And that's really what we're talking is professional events. And so for my end, as they draft the rules and go through it, if we can't find a way to make this work without, it's going to be a problem, in my opinion. And obviously, we've done it without in the past. They've done the chariot racing and they've done the steer tripping for many years, getting around it. And I'm one of the ones that you'll find me push pretty hard. If we need to push back on the FBI, I think that's the state needs to do so, because it's an onerous, non-done, same thing. Are we testing the Indian relay racers at this point? Because I don't think they'll ever do it either. And we're running pari-mutuel events right now on Indian relays. So, my belief is, and I'm probably washing a little laundry here in front of the committee and the public, but I think there's just certain areas that we're probably not going to be doing drug testing on, even though it sits in the statutes. They're going to have to come and talk to us if they don't like it.
So this bill.
That's a personal opinion on it. And I'm sorry if I overran on you or pushed, but we've met multiple times with some of these organizations, and they're just not going to do it.
So Senator, this at least puts a framework in place to begin to work the rules and see where we can get on this. Is that kind of a safe way of putting it?
Mr. Chairman, committee, yeah, it puts us in compliance on paper. And that's, I'm going to be honest about it, puts compliance on paper. And then if you're you're doing it, if they want to come in and tell us that we have to do it. Because this doesn't, by doing this, we're not forcing ourselves to do it. It just says that the language is in statute for us, and that's what the FBI wanted. You know, I held that bill a few years ago, and I take umbrage to it. I think they've way overstepped, and I think it'll get overdone. You know, right now, I think Nick will tell you, anybody that's in the area where the horse is at legally now, I think has to be fingerprinted and do it. You can't even walk back to the winner's circle legally unless you've been fingerprinted and have a background check. And I personally think that's a huge overreach, as I understand testing horses and riders, but I don't understand the rest of it. So I'll probably continue to be a thorn for Nick and part of the commission.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Laramuni, comments? Thank you. Thanks for letting the senator interject a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can stand for any other questions if you have any questions.
Okay. Committee, anything else on this front? Really appreciate you coming down, Nick. Thank you. Senator Boner.
Sorry to be so
I'm sorry.
difficult, but I'm just trying to understand this a little bit. So what happens if we don't pass the bill? Does that get us in more trouble with the FBI then? It just,
Mr. Chairman,
Senator, go ahead.
if you remember 3 or 4 years ago, I drawered that bill. And it became very apparent that if it stayed in the drawer, we weren't going to be horse racing in Wyoming. The FBI will intervene. The AG's office got into it. This bill is critical if we're going to go forward with looking at doing it. They can propagate rules and do different things to work around it, but my belief is it's absolutely necessary. I'll let Mr. Laramendi follow through, but my belief is this is a very necessary bill.
Mr. Laramuni.
Chairman Land and Senator Bonner, yes, if this bill doesn't pass, we would not be able to have parimutuel rodeo events. I'm still waiting for your definition as to what.
Thank you both. Appreciate you guys. Let's go to anyone else who wants to testify on Senate File 164, parimutuel rodeo definitions. Anyone in the room that wants to testify on this little bill? How about anyone online? Okay, I'm going to close public testimony on this bill. What's your pleasure, senators?
Move the bill.
Moved by Senator Schuler. Any discussion? Any discussion? Sue, would you take roll on Senate File 164? We'll have a
Mr.
good
Chairman, this
visit
is a
upstairs.
roll call vote for Senate File 164. Senator Boner?
Aye.
Senator Hicks?
Aye.
Senator Jones?
Aye.
Senator Schuler?
Aye.
Chairman Landon?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 5 ayes.
Okay, Senate File 164 will go to the Senate, and I'm sure that Senator Driscoll will carry that upstairs, and given the enthusiasm of the vote, it should be spirited. Debate on that one. Okay, committee, let's go to Senate File 132. Senator Jones, this is your bill, protecting critical infrastructure and systems from drones. You're welcome to stay here, or you can go out front if you want.
Doesn't matter to me either way, it's fine. I guess I could just stay here.
Okay. Take it away. Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, I'll just talk about a little bit of the background that came about to get me to generate this bill. In December in Sweetwater County, we did have unmanned aircraft, unidentified drones, you know, is obviously the term we were using for them, but these weren't drones that people got as Christmas presents. We were talking about drones that are the size of SUVs, the ones that have been reported in the news in New Jersey and back east and other places like that, that you weren't sure if they were conspiracy theories or not. Well, they're not conspiracy theories. They're happening in several places across the state above critical infrastructure. And one of the major problems with this is no one can identify them. Our sheriff's department cannot find them on their drone apps. They're basically line of sight in the middle of the night. So it's a real concern. We worked with, my local sheriff's department is the one that alerted me to the issue. We worked with Wyoming Homeland Security, the governor's office, FAA, Our local airport was brought into the situation, and still to this day, they're unidentified. To have something like that above critical infrastructure is a serious concern, and we all should be concerned about it. So this bill basically is just to address the use and operation of unmanned aircraft systems over critical infrastructure and critical systems. It gives parameters, exceptions, and penalties, and it authorizes the use of the Air National Guard. Section 1 goes over the unlawful operation of unmanned aircraft systems, and this section defines what is unlawful pertaining to this bill, so that no person shall operate or use an unmanned aircraft system over or near critical infrastructure or a critical system. This includes intentionally photographing, loitering over or near, or taking action to promote or assist or facilitate the commission of another crime. This section does not apply to a person authorized by the FAA or if their use complies with the rules of the FAA. It doesn't apply to a government entity using their own unmanned aircraft system, nor the operation of a model aircraft in a public park owned or operated by a government entity. And it does not apply to the use of our law enforcement agencies, emergency medical service agencies, hazardous materials response teams, any of the disaster management agencies, or any other emergency management agencies for incident command, reconnaissance, personal equipment, deployment, monitoring, training, or any of those kind of purposes. If a person is found guilty of this, it is a misdemeanor. It could be imprisonment of 6 months, a fine of $2,500, or both for a first offense. It could also be a felony imprisonment not to exceed 2 years, a fine of $5,000, or both of that. The law enforcement, this bill gives law enforcement the ability to take action to prevent or stop the unmanned aircraft system. And these actions could include disabling, damaging, or removing it from the prohibited location. The governor may also order the National Guard of Wyoming to assist in taking or using reasonable actions to prevent or stop the use. Section 2 creates a new paragraph in statute also about the drones landing on land or water of another person. A person who operates or uses an unmanned aircraft in a manner that is not lawful under this section shall also be guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by imprisonment of 6 months, a fine of $750, or both. And the definition of the critical infrastructure, these include a petroleum refinery, petroleum, chemical, or rubber production, transportation, storage, or processing facility, a chemical manufacturing facility, a water or wastewater treatment facility, and water development, distribution, or conveyance system, including dams, an electric generation facility, and any substations or switch yards, an electrical transmission distribution substation, electrical transmission lines of not less than 69,000 volts, an electronic communication station or tower, an energy control center, a distribution operating center, a facility that transfers or distributes natural gas, including compressor stations, regulator stations, city gate station or pressure limiting stations, or a liquefied natural gas facility or supplier, any railroad infrastructure or facilities, any federal, state, county, chancery, or municipal courts, public safety or emergency operation facilities, federal, state, county, or municipal jails or correctional facilities, or any other facility where persons are incarcerated, federal or state military installations or facilities, hospitals that receive air ambulance services, and it goes on to describe that model aircraft, how it's defined, and also unmanned aircraft system definitions. think that pretty much goes over everything. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Well done. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, right away, I always start thinking about the young person out there with a drone who might accidentally, buzz over the water treatment plant in our town. And does the language on page 9, model aircraft, does that kind of disseminate between the large ones versus the small ones, like the ones the kids get at Christmas?
Senator
Yes,
Jones?
yes, it does. I mean, definitely, we are not trying to prohibit children or even adults from the small drones. These drones we're talking about are something much different.
So further question to the sponsor, Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, can you point out to me explicitly where it says that? That's my concern. So where in the bill does it say if I see the definition here for unmanned aircraft system, but where is the size that would exempt that out?
Senator Jones?
I think it would cover it on page 9 under model aircraft as defined as the section 336 of the FAA Modernization and Reform Act.
Okay, that's so the
Senator, go
federals
ahead.
define what that is. And that's, all right, thank you.
Yeah, yes.
So, Senator, I've just got a question to go back to the reasons for this bill. I was fascinated when you sat down and told me about what was going on in Sweetwater County. What was the remedy, and has there ever been one? Do we still have things flying around over the top of a couple of our critical infrastructures? And what is do we have to bring the National Guard in to just shoot them out of the air? What is the remedy, I guess?
We actually have not remedied the situation. We never found out what they are. I believe it is ongoing, and not just Sweetwater County. Sublette County is having issues with it. Some have been here in Laramie County. 3 SUV-sized drones with 30 or so smaller drones along with it. The smaller drones bump off of the larger drones. They think maybe to charge them or something. I mean, this is uncharted waters. And we've brought in Senator Barrasso's office and Representative Hageman's office to try to assist us. But truly, we really are still at the point where we have no idea if this is friend or foe.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the lines of the model aircraft, looks like the only actual use of the definition is on page 3. I may be missing it, but that's limited to a public park, and that just seems kind of like a very odd, carve out, I guess. I'm thinking, I personally, I use one of those small drones you get at a big box store in my livestock operation. So if I fly over an oil and gas pad that's being leased from us, is that, I just don't see a very significant exception for model aircraft to the previous considerations. I understand the definition, but it has to actually apply at some point. So I'm just wondering how it applies to the bill.
Senator Jones, do you want to comment on that?
I do think that they would be covered under that you're intentionally, on page 2, it talks about you're intentionally loitering over critical infrastructure or something like that. We're not talking about people who are just, flying around and they accidentally fly over the top of the dam or something like that. This is people that are intentionally taking pictures or hanging out there for periods of time. That is the way this bill is designed.
Okay, so any other questions? Go ahead, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a kick out of page 4, line 17 through 23, that a peace officer or law enforcement official might have the authorization with this bill to use reasonable actions to prevent or stop them. So in my mind, I have visions of, we've had enough of this, and boom. Am I just thinking out too far out of the box, or what's your thought on that?
Senator Jones.
Actually, these particular drones that we are talking about are 4,000 to 5,000 feet in the air. So, and most of them have been showing up only at night. So it's we are giving law enforcement the authority to do something about it, but I'm not sure that all law enforcement across the state even has a manner to take them out. And also, we don't know what they are. We're not sure if they're weaponized or those kind of issues. So we're giving them the authority to do this, but I'm not sure that it all could just be handled by local law enforcement, unfortunately.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead, Senator Hicks.
I'm just thinking that we have this little potential shooting complex up in the, and that'll have a range out to 2 miles, so that's 10,000 feet, so,
Senator, I agree with you. We may need those guys.
yeah,
That's
so,
what I'm thinking.
call in some help there.
Yeah. Well, this, if there isn't anything else for the sponsor, senators, I want to go to anyone who'd like to
Chairman.
testify on this.
One other question, and it kind of dovetails in, I think, that where Senator Boner is. I'm just trying to make sure that we walk through this, that it covers that. And it gets to this subsection B, and then it calls out a number of exemptions as to, this section shall not apply to certain activities. And I understand Senator Jones's explanation is subsection A says the criminal act is basically to intentionally photograph, loiter, or in any furtherance of a crime. But then this section shall not apply to, and this is the exemptions. And my concern is did we capture everybody in those exemptions? And so that's what I'm thinking of is you may have a big parcel, back to Senator Boner saying, big parcel of private land and has something like, a gas facility on that and stuff. Is that captured now, that if they're using a drone on there, and again, it may be the size of the drone and nature is it's a non-issue, but I just think that the way I read this, even if it was a private person on their own private property flying, but maybe it's captured under the photographing and the loitering thing. I just think that's a question that probably when it gets to the floor, we better have a pretty definitive answer on.
Thank you, Senator. Comments on that, Senator Jones?
Mr. Chairman, I understand completely what you're saying. I think it does go back to that section on intent. What is your intent? Just a model use of it, or obviously these situations we're talking about are not some child with his drone. But if you feel like we need to tighten that up a little bit, we definitely could add some language in there.
Senator Boner.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'll just come clean. I've used my drone to take a picture of an oil rig before because I think it's important I think it's important to explain, to my state of Wyoming, what we do in the Powder River Basin. And so when we get to work the bill, I think hopefully we can look at page 3, line 15. And I think I don't know why we carve out, you can apparently only in a publicly owned park. That's just a really odd, very specific situation. I don't know why we wouldn't not allow for the use of a model aircraft that is not flying at 3,000 feet, isn't the size of a SUV, these tiny little things. So I think we do have to be we'll work the bill, and I think it's a good bill, good intent, but we don't want to capture folks who are out recreating potentially on their own private property.
No, good points made, Senator Boner, and I think we do want to be careful, and like both the senators on the ends here have said, we can sure work the bill. Always remember that it's going to come down to the discretion of law enforcement always and everywhere anyway, but I don't see anybody from the law enforcement world here. Is there anyone that would like to testify on Senate File 132 this morning?
Any Black Hawk helicopter pilots?
Anyone else want to testify? Come on up and let's line up and visit about this bill, and then we'll get to the third one of the day, so.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Pickard. I'm representing Continental Resources and also Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Pete Obermueller was unable to be here. He's across the hall. First, what I'd like to say is, there's one thing, I mentioned this earlier today, that's probably missing from this bill, and that's more co-sponsors. I mean, Senator Jones, you've done a fantastic job in gathering up a lot of support for this, and we stand in full support of it. Ironically, you wouldn't think that drones are an issue, but in the oil patch, they certainly are. They have become prevalent, especially in the processing facilities. We've seen intentional acts done, not in Wyoming, but in other jurisdictions, and that have caused environmental hazards and damage to these critical infrastructure, primarily our pipeline facilities and our gas gathering and processing plants. So we stand in full support of it. And I would draw your attention, and to Mr. Chairman, to Senator Hicks and Senator Boner's question. Senator Boner, I also purchased a $1,000 drone, pulled it out of the box, and there's a whole stack of FAA regulations that come with it. So I think, I might not be absolutely correct, but I do think at the top of page 3, line 1, where it says a person authorized by the FAA to operate or use an unmanned aircraft, et cetera, as long as it's complies with the authorization granted and the rules promulgated by the FAA. I think when you open up that drone box, it has all of that in there. Might be mistaken, but I think intentionally the bill was drafted with all of those considerations. If it needs a few tweaks for those personal uses, we'd be happy to support that as well. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Appreciate it, Mr. Pickard. Thank you. Any questions? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Pickard, generally, if you see them out there in the oil patch or wherever, are they there to take pictures? Are they there to try to figure out, if you've got some new, awesome thing going on out there that they're not aware of? Is it that kind of thing, or what do you usually see them out there?
Mr. Pickard.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, for a variety of reasons, we operate drones in around our facilities, especially on the pipelines. Years and years ago, you would fly 172s and 182s with manned aircraft, and you'd have 2 people in there or a really good pilot that could turn the plane. I did that in Albany County when I was 20 years old. Actually got a lot of flying time in, and an easy way for somebody else to pay for those those hours. But the technology is such that it's really easy to run these drones down pipelines to look for leaks, look for any other damages that might be out there. So it's critical, and in this bill, it has language that exempts us in those operations. We also take pictures, just like Senator Boner. We're out there taking pictures in our fields, to look at the progress that we're making, indicate to landowners the type of rehabilitation and reclamation we're doing after we've disturbed the ground, things of that nature. So it's very positive. It's a great technology. But again, we're looking at the language on page 2 where it's the intentional acts that are dangerous to our facilities, and that's why we appreciate the bill.
Senator Boner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. They still do fly those airplanes, manned airplanes, by the way. But so just making sure I understand, you're talking about, challenges you've had in other states specifically. Were those the small model ones that we're all talking about, kind of the ones you can buy out of the box? Were they large, or are we covered by this model aircraft definition to alleviate that concern?
Thoughts on that, Mr. Pickard?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Boner, it is not the small unmanned aircraft. It is the larger ones that can do significant damage. And again, we don't know what their intentions are in the sky when they're out there around our infrastructure. So the language in here, we've reviewed it. We're very comfortable with it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pickard. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Committee. My name is Dale Steenbergen. I'm with the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce and the Wyoming Chamber of Commerce. We represent chambers all over the state of Wyoming. So obviously in Cheyenne, we have an interest in this from the military standpoint. And I would just tell you that this is not something happening everywhere else. This is happening in our backyard. I haven't been to a meeting at the Pentagon in the last 5 years where one of their major topics of concern is how to defend military assets from drones. And secondarily, they challenge us as community leaders to look at the electric facilities that are serving Air Force facilities, from the water services that are serving Air Force facilities, and of course, all of the military facilities that we have, Guard included. So we definitely support this bill. I see Senator Boner's wearing his missile pin today, and we certainly support our men and women in uniform. The military they are spending millions of your tax dollars, probably billions at this point, to protect from this. And so you were asking how it's done. If you fly one over Warren Air Force Base, you might get a net over your drone that takes it to the ground. They may attack it electronically. There's a number of systems they have, and law enforcement is going to have to advance with that. Two things that I would like to address with this bill. One thing is the amendment for kids and stuff flying. That's probably good that we figure that out. But secondly, I'm not sure how you come up with a size definition. You can do a lot of damage with a pretty small drone. If you put it at 1 foot and weighs however, 20 pounds, the Chinese will figure out how to weigh in at 19 pounds and be 11 foot, 7/8 inches. So I think there's probably some work you need to do on that to come up with those definitions. But this is an important issue, and it's an increasing issue. And I appreciate the Senate's effort to address this issue, and appreciate the support to come up with ways to protect our communities.
Thank you, Mr. Steenbergen. Always appreciate you being here to represent this southeast corner. I guess we should have probably seen this coming earlier. 2 or 3 years ago, you remember we had some bills that pondered and took up this issue on the Judiciary Committee. It was more from a private residence standpoint, but now we've got bigger and more problematic things going on out there. And appreciate your testimony. Any questions for Ms. Cheyenne Chamber? Thank you, Dale. Any other testimony on this bill? Come on. It's good to see some familiar faces this morning. Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Travis Deet. I'm with the Wyoming Mining Association and don't often get a chance to sit before this committee, so I was wondering where the familiar faces were. But it's, Mr. Chairman, it's good to be with you.
Always good to hunt one down with you.
And, hey, I have to apologize, Mr. Chairman. I meant to be here earlier. I had on my calendar that the meeting was at noon, and I guess that's kind of midway through the session. Getting confused, even more confused than I usually am. So I apologize for being here late. We support the bill, and I want to just commend the bill sponsor for bringing this forward. We did have a couple of questions from the mining industry side of things. We have worked with the sponsor of the bill to alleviate those, and I meant to get here early to hand out an amendment, but smarter people than I have got it out. But one of the things that we would like to do, and I did talk to Director Budd about some things, and we would like to have, if the committee would consider adding mining to the critical infrastructure list in the bill. And so we have submitted an amendment for your consideration that on page 9, line 7, to insert Section T, add any surface, subsurface, or in situ mining or manufacturing infrastructure facility. And with that, that would alleviate our concerns, and we could fully support the bill. And when we talk about drones, this drone technology, and I think I had testified before your committee a couple of years ago, Mr. Chairman, on this. The use of drone technology in the mining industry is growing. And, our mines all across the state are using drone technology for surveying, for reclamation, stockpile management, dust control, and more things as the technology grows. So it's important for us, but it's also important to protect our infrastructure as well, because mining infrastructure and our mining operations are critical to the state of Wyoming. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions, but I would certainly appreciate the committee's consideration of the amendment we've offered.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. D-Type. Really appreciate it. Any questions for the Mining Association? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I think it's important to add that to this legislation. My question is, and I think it kind of would be for even the other exceptions, do you ever have issues where there could possibly be drones that are not operated by a particular company? And I guess what I'm trying to get at, trying to still, maybe ideas for infrastructure or mining or whatever it is. Do you ever see that happening, or is that an issue already?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, not to my knowledge, but I think, as this field's growing, I think it's better to just protect ourselves and cover our bases.
Any further questions? Thank you, Travis. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Morning, Mr. Bush.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Also a pleasure to be in front of this committee, I think for my first time. David Bush, Black Hills Energy, mostly just here to be Travis's wingman on this issue. We have the Wyodak mine up in Campbell County, along with a lot of generation assets in that area as well. The Gillette Energy Complex, several coal facilities there. We do have a natural gas generation plant east of town here. I have checked with our folks. They haven't seen anything yet up in Campbell County over our stuff, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. So this is something that an issue that we're keenly aware of and a bill that we're in support of and would like to see it move forward. So it's certainly an issue that has cropped up in other parts of the state, so.
Appreciate it, Mr. Bush. You and I get to hang out on corporations a lot, but not very often here, so it's good to see you. Anything for Mr. Bush this morning? Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate you both. Any further testimony on this good little Senate file? We're talking drones, Senate File 132. Any other testimony in the room? Anyone else? Sue, we've got some folks online this morning that I would look forward to visiting with. If you could. Do we want to start with the lieutenant? Do you have Lieutenant Fisher with us, I hope?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, he's on.
Okay, Lieutenant, good morning. I think you're muted, Lieutenant, if you want to unmute.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Hey, no problem. We can hear you. Take it away.
Thank you, Chairman Landon, Senators. I'm representing the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Office this morning and speaking on behalf of Sheriff Grossnickel, who unfortunately couldn't testify in front of this committee this morning. He's actually testifying right now in another committee. We are in support of this bill. In reading it, we support the prohibiting the drones. As Senator Jones spoke a little while ago, we've been dealing with drone sightings, specifically over the power plant in Sweetwater County, also visible from the airport, over the communities of Rock Springs and Green River, to include areas over water treatment plants. We've been unable to identify those drones or unmanned or aircraft. We don't know for certain what exactly they are because of the height that they're flying at. It's dark. All we can see are lights. However, I think the language in this does provide law enforcement the opportunity to take some enforcement action should we determine the intent behind what these aircraft are doing and who may be piloting them.
So, Lieutenant, thank you for being here this morning. We appreciate it. We know that you've had 24 hours over there, so our thoughts go out to you guys on some other issues. But I am just fascinated by what the conversation might be in your department about what to do with these high-altitude structure, these drones. What was that visit like? You had to maybe talk about how can we get rid of these things, but that would be difficult.
It is. It's very difficult. We've tried tracking the drones with apps. We've tried driving around the area, the desert, the roads that are accessible in order to try to find operators of the drones with no success. And so it's been frustrating because we have no answers for our industrial leaders. We have no answers for the community. And so it's been very challenging for us. I know the bill doesn't change us not finding the answers, but at least, right now we have no enforcement action to take if we do find people other than asking them not to fly over the critical infrastructures. This bill would change that and give us the opportunity to then take some enforcement action and hopefully maybe deter individuals from doing this in the future.
Thanks, Lieutenant. Senator Jones?
Thank you, Lieutenant Fishner. I had a quick question. I know that I was told something about the drones following some of your deputies. And could you talk about that just a little bit and maybe how this might help with that as well, if they're over your facility?
Lieutenant, go ahead.
Yes. Chairman Landon, Senator Jones. One of the initial sightings, we had several deputies go out, attempt to photograph, identify anything of the aircraft, operators of the aircraft. They were unsuccessful on their way back into Rock Springs from the power plant. One or two of the drones actually followed our deputies back in all the way to our Justice Center, which is located with our detention facility. And then they departed the area, the drones did, after following our deputies back. So, the drones or the aircraft, the technology, it's obviously capable of falling for a great distance. We're talking 30 some miles from the power plant back to our facility, plus the airtime that those drones had already out there. Reportedly, what this bill would do, again, if we can find the operators, it gives us the opportunity that flying over these infrastructures to take some enforcement action with the penalties that are attached to this bill.
Hey, any other questions for the Sheriff's Department? Lieutenant, thanks again for weighing in. We really appreciate it.
And actually, Chairman Landon, I'd just like to answer, if I could, maybe answer a question that Senator Boner had earlier about flying his drone over his property, taking pictures of the oil rig or the lease that's on his property. I would like to think that law enforcement would not take any enforcement action in that aspect. I know I wouldn't, given the nature of the bill, the purpose of the bill behind that. I don't think law enforcement is looking to take enforcement action against those people who have legitimate purposes for doing things over their own property to take care of that property or to enhance whatever businesses they may be doing with property that they own. So I hope, in Sweetwater County, I'd like to think all law enforcement would be that way, and law enforcement in general across the state would support Senator Boner in the course of his business.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Senator Boner.
Okay, so it sounds like you wouldn't object to an amendment that would just ensure that that's the case, then, Lieutenant.
No, not at all. No, we don't want to infringe on property owners. I know under Title 10, Statute 10-4303 about flying drones over private property, landing it on private property. Property owners are permitted to fly drones over the property that they own. Taking that into account along with this Senate bill. We wouldn't object to any amendment to this Senate bill that would allow you to fly a drone over your property, taking photos of any land that maybe you're leasing to a defined critical infrastructure.
Thank you again, Lieutenant. Appreciate it. Best wishes to you guys in the department over there, and have a good day, okay?
Thank you.
So, Sue, I think I might have seen Kelly Carpenter on the screen there. I think, let's go that direction. Ms. Carpenter, good morning.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Kelly Carpenter with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Thanks for the opportunity to provide comments virtually today from Laramie. We sit in support of this bill. Our support lies in a few areas, of course, national security concerns with some of these drone sightings and associated data collection. Domestic security is a concern as well. For example, private drones or these drones could interfere with firefighters or law enforcement, of course, as well as, personal information and private property rights are reasons to support the bill. It's been mentioned by members of the committee that not all critical infrastructure is on public lands or over public lands. Often pipelines and transmission lines, for example, can be surrounded by private property. So that's a concern, but we do recognize the need to protect producers who utilize drones in their everyday operation, as well as mentioned, kids and small hobby operators. With that, I'll take any questions you or the committee may have.
Ms. Carpenter, thank you. Appreciate the Farm Bureau being here this morning. Anything, committee? Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. Appreciate it. Let's go to Mr. Brubaker if he's around this morning. I think that's Mr. Brubaker right there.
Sure is, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you. I wish I was there in person this week with you. I will look forward to catching up with you all in person next week. Mr. Chairman, my name is Devin Brubaker. I'm the airport director for the Southwest Wyoming Regional Airport in Sweetwater County, and I'm currently the president of the Wyoming Airports Coalition. First of all, before I jump into some of my testimony, I want to point out some of the questions about defining the size of UAS and drones. I would encourage the committee and the legislature to rely on the FAA definitions for different sizes instead of creating conflicting standards between state and federal regulations. With that said, Mr. Chairman, the Airports Coalition does not have a position on this bill. However, we think it's an important discussion to have. As the largest group of aviation professionals in the state, we are simply here to provide some information and ask for a potential simple amendment. Mr. Chairman, please be aware that my colleagues and I all lack law degrees, so we will defer to you and your more than capable LSO staff to guide you in avoiding federal preemption issues when it comes to regulating airspace and the operation of aircraft, including UAS. It is important to note that the FAA has absolute regulatory authority over all airspace and the operation of aircraft, both manned and unmanned. The FAA has published a fact sheet regarding state and local regulation of UAS to help lawmakers avoid preemption in their efforts. We would be happy to get that to you or the LSO if it would be helpful. One area that does give us pause in the bill that could result in federal preemption is paragraph D and E on pages 4 and 5. It is expressly prohibited by federal law to take or destroy an aircraft, no matter whether it's manned or unmanned. So those sections of this bill would likely call to the attention, would call the federal attention to this bill and cause a preemption investigation. Mr. Chairman, in terms of the simple amendment, we would like to see on page 9, line 6, we'd like to see a new subparagraph added that states a public use airport, basically adding a public use airport to the definition of critical infrastructure. This is important to us as there is no enforceable laws locally on how law enforcement can basically deal with unauthorized UAS on or near the airport. By adding airports here, we provide them the tools they need to address the issue. And with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions. I am far from a UAS expert or federal preemption expert, but anytime you touch airspace or aircraft regulation, it is obviously a concern. And I get the intent here. I have spent many hours on the phone with Homeland Security, local elected officials, the Sheriff's Office, Highway Patrol, dealing with the UAS issues that have existed over the last several months in Sweetwater County. And it's definitely an issue that would be great to be addressed. We just need to be aware that the area around Sweetwater County is considered unrestricted airspace by the FAA. And therefore, as long as those aircraft are operating within the confines of federal law, there really isn't anything anybody can do. So the bill is important. The conversation is important. We appreciate Senator Jones bringing it forward and look forward to working with the legislature to find ways to work within federal law to limit how these drones are used. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brubaker. You know, this is just me, but I've got this knee-jerk reaction this morning that says I might want to create one of those preemption investigations. Sounds like we might need one of those, but Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, a little bit along that line, Devin, by adding public use airport in there, that airspace is already governed and regulated by the FFA, is it not?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, the airspace around the airport is also, at least our airport, is considered unrestricted airspace. We are a uncontrolled airport. While there is limitations on the height of drones, on how they can be operated around the airport, if we have somebody violate with even a model aircraft that operates a model drone over the airport, if we call law enforcement currently, they have no legal authority to do anything about it. This bill would allow them to have that misdemeanor charge if they are acting in any ill intent. And it does, based on our opinion, once again, we are not attorneys. We do not believe that causes any preemption issues when it's tied to the specific use of the drone, the reason for the use of the drone. As long as you're not restricting the ability of drones to traverse the airspace, then you shouldn't run into the preemption issue.
Senator Hicks.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So in reference to these small recreational drones, this legislation as it's contemplated right now doesn't address that issue anyway, or does it? And I guess, back to these are the larger unmanned type aircrafts. And so without going in and changing that definition, it wouldn't preclude, even if we put this in there, law enforcement would have no ability to go in there for, say, these small personal drones to be able to create a misdemeanor. Unless I'm wrong, that's the way I read the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Hicks, I think you're spot on, Senator Hicks. I think the discussion earlier about further utilizing the word model aircraft in the bill could be helpful. I think the addressing it for a park or a recreation facility, I believe, is what is talked about on page 3. There's obviously there's parks. We actually had one closed down here in Sweetwater County a few years ago for model aircraft. And we have to think about model aircraft in more than one sense. It's not just a drone that you get at Walmart, but it's also an aircraft that looks like it's an RC aircraft, model aircraft. And so that's defined by the federal government. I think that there could be some improvements made to how the words model aircraft are infused into the bill. I don't necessarily have those amendments ready for you today, but I could be happy to work with this committee or Senator Jones on some floor amendments as well.
So, Mr. Brubaker, we would welcome if you want to continue to work that at home and then reach out to the senator. We would appreciate that because we certainly want it to fit in with all that you've described this morning. You deal with a lot on the FAA level, and so please keep working it as it goes. Any other questions for Mr. Brubaker? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brubaker. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think I show that that's all that we have. Sue, is there anyone else waiting?
That's everybody for this bill, Mr. Chairman.
That's it? Okay, I'm going to close testimony on the bill. Committee, what's your pleasure? Senator Schuler moved this bill, Senate File 132. Let's work this bill a little bit. We have a couple of suggested amendments, but committee, rather than going page by page, let's just get started. Any amendments on this bill? Senator Hicks.
I think to address the concerns of Senator Boner and myself, if we just went over to page 4, and then on line 3, just insert a new Romanet 6, and that would include the language as follows. The use by a private landowner of an unmanned aircraft system on their own property, notwithstanding 913-503 subsection A. So in other words, if they could use an unmanned aircraft or their own but if there's critical infrastructure on that private property, they still are subject to the prohibitions under 913-503A.
Can you do us a favor, Senator, and restate paragraph 6, Romanet 6 would be?
Let's see, the use by a private landowner of an unmanned aircraft system on their own property, notwithstanding 19-13-503A.
Does everyone understand the amendment? Any discussion? All All those in favor of Senator Hicks's amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Okay, that amendment has passed. Senator Boner.
Yeah, just within the exceptions on page 3, lines 15, 16, and 17, I think that, exempting model aircraft, and I think the FAA definition is aircraft that's 50 pounds or less. I think that's, makes sense. I'm just wondering why it's limited to a public park, when I know that we're talking so many smaller systems, a lot of folks like to use them to recreate on public lands, maybe fly it, over the town, or, or who knows? I'm just wondering, why that exemption is so specific and limited to public parks, when it seems like there's a lot more uses to these smaller aircraft, which we already distinguish in the bill and the definition. I'm just wondering, should we maybe just exempt out model aircraft entirely? And if we do that, I think we still get at the concept of the bill, which these larger systems, which are, we only know who's operating them, seems like they're very capable. And then we have these smaller ones that have been around for a while and might take a picture or two, but that's kind of it.
So are you suggesting we strike paragraph 4 altogether, or
No,
add
I'm
private land to that?
actually just on 16 and 17 potentially. So the exemption would be for model aircraft, recognizing that, probably a small drone you get off the shelf could technically do some damage if it's rigged up with explosives or something like that, but I like to think that's already against the law, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, just a more of a discussion here. Like I said, that really stuck out to me is why would we only exempt model aircraft for a publicly owned park when there's so, quite a bit more use of it. And then of course we have the point that, if you're already using it in accordance with the FAA, then we're covered there. So, but then again, that's a manned aircraft system, which is a different definition than the model aircraft. So just a little bit more discussion there.
Yeah, I don't know where we want to take that. Senator, I'm following a little bit, but not completely. We can certainly continue to
Mr. Chairman?
work that. Senator Hicks?
It seems to me, because this is the only place in the entire bill where we call out model aircraft. And I think that adds it's a whole other issue, right? I think we would be much better off, because can you use those on BLM lands or Forest Service lands? Yeah, absolutely. Completely legal now under FFA. I think just by getting rid of that section, it really gets it back to what the intent is to focus on unmanned aircraft. So my motion, Mr. Chairman, would be just to strike lines 15 through 17.
Okay, does everyone understand the amendment? Any further discussion? All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Okay, lines 15 through 17 have been struck with that amendment. Anything, Senator Boner?
Just and along those lines, if I'm unaware of any other definitions or use of model aircraft in the bill, do we still need the definition on page 9 if that's out of the bill? And there could be, I could very easily be missing it. That's why I asked the question.
Senator Jones, did you get that question?
I do believe that is the only place.
Senator Boner, can you restate a concern, is it, or just making sure that line 11 on page 9 is adequate to define unmanned aircraft system? Is that?
Mr. Chairman, no, the page 9, line 7, model aircraft. If we don't use the definition in the bill, why is the definition there?
I'm trying to think, I don't think it necessarily hurts the bill for us to do that. Because it does draw that line, and it defines. And so we may change our minds as this works forward. Good thoughts to bring it up, though, Senator. Anything else, folks? We do have, go ahead, Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would go ahead and offer the amendment on page 9, line 5, after services, delete the period, insert a semicolon, And then on page 9, line 7, insert T, any surface, subsurface, or in situ mining or manufacturing infrastructure or facility.
Okay, that is the amendment offered by Mr. Detai this morning. Any questions? All those in favor of that amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Okay, that amendment has passed and we're back on the bill. Anything else on the bill, committee? Anything else? Okay, Sue.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Hicks.
I'm not gonna offer an amendment. I may work with the sponsor on this and as a co-sponsor. The one thing that just strikes me is a glaring, and it may be an entire different bill for a different year. But one of the biggest uses of these drones is becoming actually offensive weapons. And so if you've watched what's going on over in Ukraine, I mean, these are little bitty, I mean, if they can carry a 5-pound or 10-pound package, they are literally wiping out tanks and stuff. And what I'm worried is it's not in here. There's no criminal penalty for somebody putting explosives on a small drone and flying it towards critical infrastructure. So I'm just thinking for those cases, if there is explosives tied to any size of these drones, we need to create a criminal action for that. And that may just be, we need to work with LSO because it may be outside the scope. I don't think so. But I would like to work with the sponsor and maybe bringing a committee of the whole or second reading amendment to create a felony act for anybody that attaches an explosive to any model aircraft or unmanned and then flying around any infrastructure. Quite frankly, we shouldn't be tying explosives to any drones.
So then you're gonna get into the 4th of July celebration where they take them up and they wanna drop a Roman candle off of one of those, and then we've got somebody in Rollins. Senator Boner?
Yeah, I think
Good stuff, though.
that's a good discussion to have. Like I said, I'd like to think that blowing stuff up is already against our statutes, but we can always take a look at it and just, my good friend actually was, one of his staff jobs about 10 years ago at Global Strike Command was dealing with this with the active duty Air Force. I can tell you that, of course, our active duty military is very aware of the potential consequences, especially here in southeast Wyoming. It's a potential vulnerability that I'm sure that they're all over. And while we can always help, it's important to remember that they're going to be responsible for protecting their assets. That's something I can assure you that they take very seriously.
Well, and committee, good thoughts. I do think this is, we're on the edge of this thing. We already took it up with our Judiciary Committee. You guys, many of you remember that. Now we are taking it up on this front. I think you're going to hear a lot more about it. You certainly are hearing about it nationally, and whether it hits this committee or whether our management council wants to take a look at this in a bigger way, we may end up with several committees on this front. I know that we're concerned about it when it comes to hunting, but we've already kind of dealt with it there. I just think it's part of what's coming. I mean, this is the new frontier out there, and so at any rate, let's take roll on Senate File 132, Sue, so we can move on.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 132 as amended. Senator Boner?
Aye.
Senator Hicks?
Aye.
Senator Jones?
Aye.
Senator Schuler?
Aye.
Chairman Landon?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 5 ayes.
Okay, thank you very much. Senate File 132 will make its way to the Wyoming Senate, and we'll be right behind you, Senator Jones, if a fight breaks out upstairs.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Nice job this morning. Okay, let's move on to our final bill of the morning, Senate File 170, Grizzly Bear Management Prohibition, sponsored by Senator Hicks. Senator Hicks is here this morning, so Senator, you can stay up here if you'd like or go out front, whichever you prefer. But take us through Senate File 170.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this is a constituent bill, but from a number of constituents over the years. And so I'll just walk back through just a little history. Grizzly bears were first listed sometime in the late 1960s, I believe, as an endangered species. We have spent a lot of time and effort in the state and just visiting with the director of the morning to get the updated. So just state expenditures in, say, the last 20 years is pushing somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 million that the state has invested. And keep in mind, other than the 3 or 4 week period that they were delisted about 4 years ago. And I mean delisted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and was relisted by a federal judge. We have spent a significant amount of money on grizzly bears in this state that are a federal trust species that really we have no management authority over. We coordinate activities with the federal government on this stuff. Mr. Chairman, one of the old time guys, you remember, we used to spend significant amounts of general fund money offsetting the cost of the department because it is not a state managed species. We reversed that a number of years ago when we raised license fees somewhere around 2018, back when we were in the Jonah building. And we took that expenditure and put that back on the cost of the sportsman. And so I've had a number of sportsmen in the last year, constituents saying, why are you spending, my license fee dollars managing a federal trust species? It particularly came to light with the latest decision of leaving them on the endangered species list as to why are we spending so much money on grizzly bear management when they're a federal trust species and they're not under the jurisdiction of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. I have been contacted by a number of ranchers in Northwest Wyoming and said they're very concerned about this from the aspects that the department does pretty much all of the verification of losses associated with damage, but also removal of those bears. But when we get into the removal component, we still have to contact the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and get permission to remove those bears. And so the department's still acting as an agency of the federal government doing that. But Mr. Chairman, what the bill does is it just says the department shall not engage in any management activities or activities for grizzly bears unless the activity is explicitly called out in statute. So compensation programs are in statutes, that we pay for a certain grizzly bear damage. And in the case of public safety, obviously, our Game and Fish Department has employees all over Northwest Wyoming, where I think there's only 2 people at the Fish and Wildlife Service in the entire state that have any jurisdiction at all. So it would still provide the department to do that. Mr. Chairman, in discussion with the director and the department, if this bill was to move forward, I do think we need to move this effective date out to about 2028 with the hopes that it gives them plenty of time to negotiate. So I would say July 1st of 2028. That gives us 3 years to go back and work with the Fish and Wildlife Service, our congressional delegation, and try to get these things delisted either by the service or by an act of Congress. But it sends a clear message to the federal government and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that our people are getting really tired of spending our sportsman's dollar doing your job for you. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Any question of the sponsor? Okay, let's go to our department first. Welcome, everyone. And then I want to get to testimony on this bill as well. Good morning, Director. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Senators. Angie Bruce, Game and Fish Director. I brought 2 experts with me to really show that, this is a very important issue for the department. It's a priority for us to continue to work to delist the bear, both for the department and for the entire state. So with me, I think you guys have heard from our new Chief Game Warden, Chief of our Wildlife Division, Dan Smith. He's also from Cody, where he spent a large part of his career actively managing grizzly bears up there on the landscape, so has some real life experience to share if needed. And then to my left is Dan Thompson. He is our large carnivore supervisor. And I might be a little biased, but I do think he's probably the best grizzly bear expert in the nation. We're very fortunate to have him with the department. So he can tell you any ins and outs of grizzly bear management and data that you might have questions with.
Director, I was just thinking of Mr. Smith, being up there in the northwest corner managing grizzly bears, and then you come to the southeast corner and you're managing panels like this. It's not a whole lot different, is it? It's just moving stuff around.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just slightly different.
Well, appreciate it. So, Director, I think we're all interested in your reactions to this bill. We've certainly got a lot of reactions coming into the email boxes, so please take it away and walk us through what this would mean for the department.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So as the sponsor said, that we still would be responsible for investigating pain damage claims related to grizzly bears. A note of caution there, though, a lot of our work with landowners is preventative measures, proactive measures to prevent that damage. Therefore, we anticipate that if we're not able to do those proactive measures, that we will see increased damage and more cost to our constituents. And again, we'll still be able to respond to conflict situations, public safety being the top concern. But really, let's focus on what this bill would prevent us from doing. This bill would prevent us from grizzly bear population monitoring. So a lot of folks might ask, what is our role and why are we involved in that? Dan, with his team of folks, has worked very closely over the years with the federal biologists, with the other states, Idaho and Montana as well, to use the best science available to understand the population and what it's doing. I'm afraid that if we do not play that essential role and play that leadership role, that the federal government will use other means to estimate populations which may not be as accurate. We have gained a lot of credibility across the nation by being so heavily involved and producing the best science available. So much that I'd like to say that the other game and fish agencies across the nations were extremely disappointed in the recent decision by the Fish and Wildlife Service because they know how hard the department has worked in getting and obtaining that information and meeting all the things necessary to delist the bear. Second, this bill would prohibit us from those preventative measures. We do a lot of outreach and education for the main purpose of everyone from the general public, the hikers, the hunters, the anglers, to be able to recreate in a landscape that has grizzly bears. That safety component and educating folks of what that means is extremely important. Third, and most importantly, I believe it would prevent us from working on the removal of the grizzly bear from the endangered species list. As I said, this is a priority for me personally, and I do think the stars are aligned. Yes, we did get that recent decision that was frustrating and disturbing for our work. However, we currently just got confirmed Secretary Burgum with Department of Interior. We are anxiously awaiting for the new director of the Fish and Wildlife Service. We have no doubt that that will be favorable to help us move this forward to a delisting. Also working with our federal delegation. I've been in contact with Representative Hageman's staff. As you know, she's reintroduced her Grizzly Bear Delisting Act. It was a joy to actually get to talk to her in person last week when she was here and specifically talk about next steps for that. And then Senator Lum is speaking to her staff. Again, we just heard last week that she introduced a bill along with Senator Brasso to delist grizzly bears. Her staff told me that it is her #1 priority moving in the coming year. So great to see. We'll be actively working with those delegation to testify, to gain support on federal language to delist the bear. I think it's important to say that the grizzly bears recovered, and now we need to focus on delisting them. I'm afraid that this bill will just complicate measures and make it messy. And so as we move forward, we do not want to give those folks in the public who have an interest of keeping bears on the endangered species list any reason to show that the department or the state is not serious about delisting and management. So with that, I'll just pause for any questions.
Director, thank you. Let's go to Senator Jones and then to Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, Director, I was wondering, do you have numbers? Could you tell us, like, what does our grizzly bear population look like and what you think it should look like?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator, I am going to let Dan Thompson, the expert here, step in and answer that directly for you.
Mr. Chair.
Would you introduce yourself formally for the record? We have folks streaming in this morning. Want to make sure everyone knows. Dan, appreciate you being here.
My name is Dan Thompson. I'm the supervisor of the large carnivore section. We're, I guess, specialized section, statewide unit within the Game and Fish and the Wildlife Division, based out of Lander, Wyoming. And so to answer your question, we will be going through last year's data next week to verify that, so we don't have an estimate for 2024. The most previous estimate was 1,030 grizzly bears. We just, in the past 2.5 years, done a lot of work to update this overarching strategy for how we want to see grizzly bear management in the future for a delisted population. That was just approved last summer, and that we are looking at managing within or above a range of 800 to 950, which is more tangible than some of these larger numbers we're dealing with right now.
So, Mr. Thompson, that raised my eyebrows. I appreciate very much you being here. I can remember, I thought the target population was somewhere between 300 and 400. And, then I've heard through the years, gosh, we're up to 500, we're up to 700, we're up to, and you think that a manageable population would be somewhere around 800 or 900? That's like 3 times what the target goal was initially, isn't it?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, how much time do you have? There's been a lot of changes over the years.
I wish we had all day. I'd love
Yes, and again, obviously, as we learn more, we can change some of the notions, but it started out as 300, and then 500 has been the minimum recovery criteria that's been agreed upon since the early 90s, as far as a sustainable population for reproductive and genetic health of the population. And so you'll remember in 2007, population estimate was 570 grizzly bears, and the bear was delisted. They were delisted for 2 years, actually, but that was relisted again based on issues related to a food source. Much more work, changes in some of those demographic criteria through time. Again, but that 500 base is still there. And yeah, now we're talking double that within suitable habitat.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Senator Hicks, I think you had a question.
Just real quick.
Sorry to jump in the middle.
You had talked about the efforts that the department does for educating people and stuff. And so when I look at the bill, it says action is necessary for public safety and welfare. And so I don't think that would preclude the department from continuing to conduct workshops and training and all that stuff, because that really is for public safety. And so just curious, would you, I don't think the bill prohibits the department from continuing those activities and stuff the way it's structured. And I just wanted to point that out. Mr. Chairman, it always is amazes to me as we still get to, and this would, Dan, to your effort and the department as a whole, and I always come back, the thing that Albert Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different results is a definition of insanity. Mm-hmm. And so really the only option that we have left, and we've dealt with this, the same thing with wolves, is congressional action. And I'd like to make sure that that's the direction that the department is heading, because we've delisted wolves and a federal judge puts them back on. We've delisted grizzly bears and a federal judge puts them back on the list. We have a moving political target with the agency that now even the agency puts them on and expands the recovery area now to connect populations from the northern continental divide population to Yellowstone. And so this thing it's a political football, and it's a judicial, let's just call them black little biologists. So provide me some assurances that we're not going down this road insanity with the Fish and Wildlife Service. Now, we'd be great to have their support. We get a new administration, but is the goal to get congressional delisting of grizzly bears the direction that we're heading? Are we going to go back through the service and then to the courts and then another listing? So what's the strategy here, Director?
I knew there was a question coming. I was pretty sure there was, Director, so
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, I had no doubt. Thank you, Senator Hicks, for that question and helping to clarify for you guys and the public that we will take any option to delist grizzly bears. So we're always looking at every option, but our number one priority where we're putting our emphasis right now is exactly where you said, with congressional action.
All right, thank you.
Senator Jones, or Senator Schuler and then Jones. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's obvious, I think, that the intent of the bill is to try to just say, all right, feds, you go ahead and take care of it, we're got our hands off, save some money. I don't trust the federal government, quite frankly, and I'm not sure that this will really get us where we need to go. What I'm kind of concerned with is when you start talking about estimating the populations and you're not sure exactly what the feds would do if they were in charge. And that is a concern because I don't think they have boots on the ground and have the resources that you have. And I appreciate the fact that you guys know pretty much almost exactly how many we have. And for some reason, I was thinking that the target was 600. So regardless, we're way over. And I remember asking this a couple of years ago, where's the line? What do we have to have? We have to have 2,000 and get somebody eaten by one before the federal government will actually, take action, or what? I do think with the new administration that there could be some changes that I think might be dramatic, and maybe we wouldn't need this bill. But what are your thoughts on that in terms of being able to maybe explain a little bit more, not only your counts, but your damage, being able to take a look at that, and then also ranchers that lose forage and lose cattle and that sort of thing, what this might impact with this bill?
Director, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, let me turn it over to Dan Smith, Chief of Wildlife, and have him give you a few examples that might paint the picture better.
Mr. Smith, good morning. Thanks for being here. Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler. So right now in statute, we are required to investigate damage, and Dan Thompson and his team do an excellent job of doing that. And so we have built relationships with landowners across the northwest part of Wyoming in doing that investigation. I agree with you that the Fish and Wildlife Service does not have the manpower to do that, nor the statutory obligation to as well. So we're concerned with this bill that, and I appreciate Senator Hicks's comment that along the lines of public safety, that might expand further than what I picture it being able to do. But right now, we go investigate damage, and what the statute says is we investigate it. And so, yes, a bear ate your calf, and we can give them a damage affidavit, and they could submit that. But what we're concerned may limit us in this bill is what can we do beyond that? Can we trap and relocate the bear? Can we help with hazing the bear? Can we do any kind of monitoring with the bear under this bill? Or can we only go out and say, yes, a bear killed your calf, here's your affidavit, I hope it doesn't come back. So that's one concern. For bee aviaries, for beehives, we provide electric fencing to it. So they don't have any damage yet. And so we're not required to do that, but as part of our relationship with landowners, we go and fence those with electric fence to try to keep bears from coming into that. We want to make sure that the bill doesn't prohibit us from still doing that. Public safety, it's real easy to say, if the bear is trying to tear into your house, that's obviously a public safety thing. But when people are hiking and they say they see a bear, is that a public safety thing? Can we go haze a bear away from a trailhead when he was seen yesterday? So we just want to make sure that we're not limited in still building those relationships with the public, with the landowners on bear management. As Senator Hicks pointed out, we are the only ones that are doing it. We've been doing it for a long time, and we've been building that tolerance with landowners to have some bears here. The number does seem to keep growing, but we're trying to build that tolerance, build that relationship, and we have the ability in the state to manage bears. We would like to get them delisted. As Director Bruce said, we're taking every step we can to do that. The decision was frustrating for us as well, and so we're hoping that we can get to that point.
Okay. Another couple questions, Senator Jones and then Senator Hicks, and then I want to get to some public testimony on this one. So.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Thompson, I was wondering, is there any concentrated areas that you found of the grizzly bears, or are they just sprinkled throughout our forest throughout the state?
Mr. Thompson, where are they?
Mr. Chair, Senator Jones, all of Northwest Wyoming, quite honestly. What we've seen is and we've delineated suitable habitat, biologically and socially suitable habitat. Bears kind of go wherever they want to go, but they are now going into areas that's just not good for their livelihood or the public. Where we have suitable habitat, we have higher densities in certain areas within the core of the Northwest Wyoming, but we have high density of bears in most of Northwest Wyoming in suitable habitat, which is primarily associated with forested terrain.
Okay, go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Thompson, I was just wondering about the Union Pass area that Senator Landon and I both have a little interest in that area, and we're wondering, if we're in trouble up there.
Mr. Chair, Senator Jones, I wouldn't say trouble, but I would definitely say that's a high density area. And I mean, this past summer, for example, we had one of the highest damage years we've had on record as far as depredation and grizzly bears and removal of individuals. I think we removed 21 grizzly bears for livestock depredation last year alone, which was a high year. But yeah, that area, some of these areas have been high density for decades. The Du Bois area, Black Rock, Sunlight Basin, backcountry areas. We're just seeing that expansion down into pretty much beyond suitable habitat.
So, Mr.
A
Chairman?
little disquieting, isn't it? Senator Hicks, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking if maybe if we pass this bill, then the Fish and Wildlife Service would be responsible for capture and release, and they could target Union Pass with some of those bears. It'd probably encourage you to.
It's like I always like to say, Senator, I don't think the feds are coming on any issue, but.
So, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for the
Okay, real
department.
quickly, and then
And it
we'll
gets
let the
back to
department
what
set
Dan
back.
was saying. So my recollection, how many grizzly bears a year are taken out by either vehicles or collision then, and how many because it's a department that does the removal,
Right.
lethal removal if necessary. So how many within the greater Yellowstone area total, which could be collisions, how many of the department, and do you have like maybe a 5-year running average?
Mr. Chair, Senator Hicks, I assume that's for me, sorry.
Yes.
So I don't know that I have a 5-year average for total mortality for the GYE. I can say in Wyoming, in the last decade, we averaged 21 removals, so 20 bears annually.
And when you say removals, those aren't accidentally collisions?
No, that's us targeting that animal, making that phone call you pointed out, and lethally removing that individual. And that's grown since the previous decade where we averaged 7 to 8 bears. Based on what we deal with, our livestock depredation is our highest level of conflict, 60 to 80% of our verified conflicts annually. So I'm kind of dancing around, but we verify more than 200 conflicts between grizzly bears and humans annually. Last year in the GYE, we documented over 70 known and probable mortalities. That includes being hit by a vehicle. There was 2 bears electrocuted in Yellowstone National Park. We keep a close tally on that. Of those, though, we removed 31 last year for those different reasons. And of course, human safety is top priority for us. But as mentioned earlier, we work very closely with producers and the public as more people recreate too. We had a unique scenario with a bear in the Beartooths that decided wanted to hunt people's dogs and kill them and eat them, which is not good. And so, I mean, we're seeing more unique scenarios like that as we have higher density of bears and a lot of new people using that country as well.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
one other question for the director and the department as a whole. As these discussions go on, one of the things I'm cognizant of is the cost. And so in conjunction with potential, say, congressional action to delist and for anybody that wants to, why have we not had the discussion for reimbursement? You are doing the federal government's job. And so in lieu of delisting, at the very least, every time the department goes out there and performs a removal or a trapping or a monitoring, has the discussion occurred, this is a question, Mr. Chairman, with our congressional delegation, immediately upon, because the delisting, unless it's a congressional action, could take another 2 years. We've experienced 3 years under the last administration. I would encourage the department, and have you had conversations about reimbursing the state? Because that's the fiduciary responsibility of the federal government. We ought to be handing them a bill, at the very least, until which time these bears are delisted, and have those discussions occurred. That would alleviate most of my constituents' concerns, is the cost.
Director Bruce?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, we have had those discussions in the past. We have gotten what I would consider pennies in the past for our work with endangered species, different ones with ferrets, with grizzlies, but it's not significant at all. Having those conversations again, now under a friendly administration, is a very valid point that we can do. And just an additional information, looking down at the breakdown of costs. So on average, around $2 million a year. And so looking at what this bill would do and removing that cost after hearing some of the intent of the bill, we're looking at a savings of about a fourth of that. So really, that annual monitoring and population habitat evaluation component is anywhere from $500,000, depending on how we would break these things down regarding that welfare description, maybe a little bit more savings there too. So there's still a large savings or a large cost going forward, even if this bill would go into place.
Director, I really appreciate all three of you being here. I wish we had way more time. Mr. Thompson has been really eye-opening, and we appreciate very much you being here. Mr. Smith, it's good to have experts. I'm going to let you sit back because I do want to allow for some public testimony. We're running out of time this morning. So would anyone else like to come forward and testify on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, while they're coming forward, it is my intent, after discussing this with the department, to move to lay this bill back, but because people do want to come and talk about it, I would encourage that we continue. But just going forward, I will be making a motion to lay this bill back.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. Good to see everyone this morning. It's an important topic, and it's informative to everyone. Good to see all the fresh faces this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I'll keep this very brief because I think many of my points are echoing a lot what you heard from the department itself just on the impact overall. The one thing I will say is that since we listed the bear, well, not we, good Lord, no, but 1975, and the work that the department has done since then, it has been Herculean. It has been epic. It has been incredible that we have gotten here. And the thing that I go back to over and over and over again is how tragic it is that we cannot celebrate that, because it is a huge conservation win to get to where we're at with the bear now, that we're so frustrated that we have too many. What I would say, and I think to many of the points before, is that while I really respect, I think, maybe the statement that this bill is trying to make, the action that it actually takes is probably more damaging in the long run than it is beneficial. I think about how many times I've sat through the litigation and heard the court discussions when it goes from delisting to a court battle, delisting to a court battle, and something like this, every time we mess with our large carnivores, and I'm saying this having seen 3 large carnivore bills in front of both of these chambers that are messing with the management and monkeying with it, and that just does not help our case in a court battle. It doesn't help our case at the delisting level, and I don't really think it helps us even for the national delegation working to get these 2 bills through. We're very supportive of the congressional work being done and are looking forward to seeing where that goes. I think we're in a friendly administration. I think there's hope here, and I think this bill probably doesn't do a lot to forward that hope.
Appreciate it, Ms. Johnson. Thank you. You always have good stuff. So anything for the wildlife? Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Landon, members of the committee, Lee Livingston. I did sign in as Wyoga. I am president of Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association, but I want to make it explicit that I am not testifying on behalf of them because we did not take a position on this bill. It came at a point after we had basically formed our position on bills, but just a little bit of a background. I was 9 years old when the bear was delisted in 1975. I have spent 40 years in the outdoor industry as a guide, both here in Alaska, probably with the exception, well, I'm old enough that, older than Supervisor Thompson, I've probably seen more bears than he has. Chairman Landon, you asked where all the bears are, and Senator Hicks can testify that there's a lot in the country that I operate in. One thing that wasn't mentioned about what the Game and Fish does as far as health and human safety is they are a great asset to the outfitting industry, especially those of us that operate in the backcountry. When we have bear issues, we know that we can contact them, and if there is something that can be done, they are ready to respond and help us. I was the guinea pig for electric bear fencing. This has been provided by Game and Fish, and it's now provided to a lot of folks in the backcountry. It allows us to protect our camps from bears and the damage that they can cause. And so I liked hearing Senator Hicks's proposal that this, have an effective date of 28. I think if we did not have the current administration we have, we would be the first ones to be rallying the cry to withdraw funding and stop management. I understand that can have some impacts, but the folks that I work with and the folks that I guide and bring to this out here, they are sick and tired of it. We have no problem with managing the species as it should be managed, but when your hands are tied and you're still paying for it, it does get frustrating. So I think you're seeing a lot of frustration with the recent decision. And with that, I will quit rambling and stand for any questions.
No, Mr. Livingston, it's always good to see you. And you come from God's country, but God's got a lot of bears up there.
Yes, sir, he does.
So anything for Mr. Livingston? Thank you much. Appreciate you being here. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and Senators of the committee. My name is Luke Worthington. I'm with the Wyoming Houndsman Association. You're probably wondering why the Houndsman Association is testifying on a grizzly bear bill. We completely believe in science-based wildlife management, and I do believe our Game and Fish Department, especially the large carnivore section, is the best in the nation, hands down. We need to give them the ability to use their science to manage these bears, because without that science, when you guys asked for a number, he had a number, and that was because they have the opportunity to go in there and work with these grizzly bears because of conflicts and arising occasions, which with grizzly bears being still enlisted right now, it is frustrating. I'm a guide, I'm a hound guy, and you want to see management over grizzly bears, but going about it on the legislation way, we need to do it science-based, and I would like to see this bill get shut down right now, not in the future.
Mr. Townsend, is it?
Oh, Worthington.
Worthington.
Yeah.
I apologize. I wrote down something wrong. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Let's continue to get testimony from the room. Anyone else? As we run short on time, I would ask you to just quickly get to the point, if you would, just to allow others to join you. So thanks. Good morning.
Josh Metton, Wyoming Field Manager for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. Also Cody, Wyoming resident. I live right below the hospital. I've seen grizzly bear scat in the park where I walk my dog. I've also had the opportunity to summit some of the amazing peaks in the Absaroka in July and August and see the most amazing concentrations of grizzly bears just about anywhere on Earth as they're feeding on moss sites. Both of those two examples I gave are things that I really appreciate the professionals at the Wyoming Game and Fish Department being able to manage, both managing bears in places where it's not the best place for them to be, and also be able to do the continued monitoring and research that allows us to be the leaders of wildlife management. I think this bill and other bills that we're seeing with in this legislative session, while I understand the intent behind them, I think they're concerning because they negatively impact our reputation as a state that is a leader in wildlife management, and the importance of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department to be the leader in that. And this goes far beyond predators. It relates to how we manage for our big game migrations, and the leadership that we have as a state with all of that. So I appreciate hearing that we're laying this bill back, and I would just ask that the legislature trust the department that is doing such good work, and please let them lead in wildlife management, and we'll be there to back them up.
Josh, thank you. Appreciate you being here this morning. Just by way of housekeeping, we have several constituent groups represented on our list of those streaming in this morning. We're running out of time, and so regretfully, we're not going to be able to get to any online testimony this morning. I want you to know that the sponsor has indicated that he's going to move to table this bill, so that might make a difference in testimony anyway. But we've got to get upstairs here in a few minutes, so what I'm going to do, committee, is close testimony on this bill to give us an opportunity as a committee to work this for a minute. So we'll close testimony. Mr. Garrett, please come forward. I didn't realize we had anyone else in the room. I tried to get everybody in the room. Please come forward. Let's get testimony in real quick. We're running out of time this morning, but I want to be able to take
Mr. Chairman,
action.
I very much appreciate your indulgence.
You bet, no problem. I didn't
My
mean to overlook you.
misunderstanding of where we were going with this bill. I'll be very, very brief. My name is Richard Garrett. I'm representing the Greater Yellowstone Coalition. And first, I'd like to thank Senator Hicks for his attention to an issue in the state that has probably been something that's crossed several generations. And I know Senator Hicks comes to this issue from an honest place. And so I very much appreciated Senator Hicks. However, having said that, we believe, and others have said this too, that this sends the wrong message to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and to Congress. We believe public safety will be endangered. GYC, as you might know, is a skin in the game kind of organization. We contribute to management of grizzly bears up to $10 million over the last 20 years, about $500,000 annually. We provide funding for bear boxes, food storage, fencing projects, and even a trash compactor on Union Pass at the Crooked Creek Guest Ranch. I'd like to point out that when delisted, Game and Fish will need to manage bears to continue to manage bears, and there will be a cost. I'm not sure what that cost will be, but perhaps not dissimilar to the cost that's presently incurred. And with that, I'll conclude my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Garrett, I did not mean to overlook you, and thanks for jumping up. Always appreciate your testimony and your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chairman.
for being here this morning. Okay, real quick, did I miss anybody else in the room? That was not my intention. Those streaming in, my regrets that we are running short on time and just not going to be able to get to everyone. This is a big issue for Wyoming, and understand everyone's interest. So we'll close testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill?
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we lay this bill back.
I'm assuming perhaps indefinitely.
Indefinitely.
So it's been moved to lay this back indefinitely, and I think that motion takes precedence and does not need a vote, committee. So we will lay that bill back. Appreciate the department and all of our interested groups weighing in on this one. Lots more to do on this front. A big tip of the hat to our Game and Fish Department. Congrats on many different levels, and we look forward to working with all of you as we go forward. Thank you all this morning. Committee, I think that's about it. I'm not sure if we have any other bills. Sue, we don't, do we? So, committee, that kind of clears us up on the Senate side, and then we'll have to start working those House bills later. Yeah, much later. We'll work them slowly.